see my fellow panelists as well on my other monitor. Today's session is about sustainable procurement in action, and we've got guest speakers as well with us on the session today. If some of you have been to the sustainable procurement sessions, webinars and workshops before, today is all about live case studies and how the two organizations on the session today have actually practically embedded sustainability considerations into the procurement process, templates and documents that they use. A couple of house rules. So do get involved in our poll questions. On the slide coming up, I will introduce you to the interactive portal that we're going to use and give you a little code to enter. Use the chat box for any technical support and the Q&A box for questions. I'm already going to drag the chat box down so I can see it. Questions will be answered towards the end of the session. We will run through the content first. Yes, you will get a copy of the slides with a thank you email from the marketing team. And please do share your feedback at the end. We're always looking to better our content that we present to you. So get ready to play. In a couple of minutes, we will be using something called Mentimeter. If you just go onto your phone or your tablet or your computer on Google and type in www.menti.com and enter the numeric code prompted on the screen. So it's 98101825. I put it in the chat box as well. Literally just go onto Google, type in www.menti.com, enter the numeric code, and if you can keep yourself ready, it's 98101825. Right, so I'm going to start with a round of introductions. I'm Mellita D'Silva. I work for Action Sustainability and the Supply Chain Sustainability School. I've got about 18 years experience in procurement, supply chain management, sustainability, and social value. Today with us on the call, we've got guest speakers and hosts as well. I'm going to start with Nimesh, if you want to say hi.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nimesh Mehta. I'm the head of procurement at the London Borough of Harrow.
And James Cadman.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm James Cadman, head of consultancy at Action Sustainability, and I deliver a lot of the carbon training through the Supply Chain School.
Welcome to the session, Sophie. Sophie, you're on mute, or we can't hear you. Okay, I'll come to Imogen first while Sophie's adjusting her mic. Imogen?
Hi everyone, my name is Imogen Player. I'm a sustainability consultant with Action Sustainability, and I support Sophie and Grosvenor with the use of the sustainability tool.
Sophie, you want to try saying hello? Just give it a second.
Can Sophie hear us?
You still can't hear you, Sophie. Right, I think Sophie will hop back in, so probably we should make a start. Don't worry, she will be back. Right, so today I'm going to take you through the approach to sustainable procurement. This is not a full-blown sustainable procurement webinar, don't worry, but just what's the approach to sustainable procurement? And the common question I get asked, Mel, how does social value tie into sustainability and sustainable procurement? Now we're going to go on to Mentimeter. Hopefully you've kept yourself ready, fingers crossed. So again, it's www.menti.com, 98101825. And I'm just going to present and start the quiz. So just a couple of questions to get a feel for, right, we need a lot more people coming in. For anyone struggling to get in, it's www.menti.com 98101825. I've got a couple of caterpillars and frogs, everything is entering. So I'm just going to start my quiz. Answer fast to get more points. When should you engage the supply chain about your sustainability considerations? Is it before you go to tender, through the tendering process, at the time of signing the contract, or throughout all of these stages? So the right answer is throughout all of these stages. It's not wrong if you start even at the time of signing the contract, where you may have developed a fresh sustainability policy for yourself. It's never too late to ask, but the later on you leave it in the process, it will probably cost you a lot. Before you go to tender, definitely PQQ, SQO as early as possible. So meet the buyer events, early contractor involvement. You're taking the supply chain along with you on the journey, and you're making your requirements clear really early on in the process. Procurement objectives and goals for sustainability should be aligned with your organizational goals, top to bottom, developed only by the procurement team, as we know our suppliers the best, focused on cost savings and continuity of supply, or the last thing that you should consider in the procurement process. Aligned with organizational goals from top to bottom, that's the right answer. I've reviewed a lot of tender documents and policies of organizations, and typically you would see very fancy CSR policies at an organizational level, at procurement level, because we're always strapped for time and resource. I'm exaggerating it, but it probably says something like, I need to chop the rainforest because I needed something urgently with a zero budget and I needed it yesterday. Total misalignment, quite a divorce there. Some of you've already answered the question. So what drives your organization to think about sustainability and embedding it in a systematic manner? A strategic organizational focus? Is it external, so your client or your customer is driving you to do that, or a bit of both really? It actually makes me happy to see just 3 people listening as a client or a customer. That could be a driver for major organizations, but a lot of organizations are changing the focus, understanding that things like social return on investment is not realized or seen in the first month, the first quarter, or even in the first financial year of developing your strategy or policy. You might see it in the second or third quarter, or year 2 or year 3. It's about going on that journey slow and steady and making it a strategic decision rather than an external driver driving you to do that. Right, interesting. So I'm just going to go back to my slide deck. So what's the approach to sustainable procurement? First of all, let it be proactive. The definition according to the 2400 standard is procurement that has the most positive environmental, social, and economic impact on a whole life basis. The emphasis on the word positive, so by embedding your considerations, understanding what are the drivers for your organization, writing or shaping your policy strategy, flowing it down into procurement, top to down and out to your supply chain, rather than a couple of years ago when we would be very, very reactive, plan, source, award a contract, and when something happens on site, something goes wrong on your project or organization, then investigations happen and then you start to mitigate it. By being proactive and understanding that this is a strategic decision for your company, you're embedding it into procurement, realizing that we're probably having negative impacts on triple bottom line, and proactively trying to mitigate that very, very early on. The approach is to use a framework or a guidance. So you've got the ISO 2400 as a guidance standard for sustainable procurement. Gives you an understanding of what sustainable procurement is, what you need to consider in your activity throughout the process, your policy, your strategy, and how to practically implement sustainable procurement in your tools, templates, and in your department. A guidance standard and not a requirement standard. So you will not get a nice shiny certificate in a gold frame that you can hang on the wall, but you will get an assessment score on 0 to 5 that tells you about the maturity of your organization in your sustainable procurement journey. Does it apply only to large organizations? No. The standard applies to organizations irrespective of your size, your geographical location, the sector that you work in. And one thing to remember, sustainability and sustainable procurement does not sit only on the shoulders of procurement professionals. Every stakeholder who has a say in the procurement process, so end user, specifier, commissioner, contract managers, budget holder, budget allocator, health and safety, quality, everyone who feeds into the process needs to come along with you on the journey and think about the considerations to embed them into your tender process as well. The approach needs to consider all impacts and opportunities. So again, whether you call it ESG, people, planet, profit, social, economic, or environmental, think 3 pillars or triple bottom line, because if you don't, sometimes your policy and strategy will fall flat on its face. Yes, if your most important consideration is environmental, then you will start acting on that first. Environmental is something that's very easy to comprehend. We all get it. Think about things like net zero carbon, be it 2030, 2045, 2050, whatever your considerations are, that is it. So it's about reducing waste as well, pollution prevention, environmental management overall. Economic and social aspects are where people struggle with. They struggle to comprehend or understand what it means fully. The economic sphere talks about things like profitability and cost savings. So if you're thinking about profit, not just the profitability of your organization, but about the profitability of your supply chain as well. For example, not squeezing the bottom line price in the negotiation process. Cost savings by wasting less, challenging the need and the planned source of procurement. And of course, social talks about things like education. So STEM events, volunteering, community engagement, investment, equal opportunity, not just within the staff in your organization, but diversity in your supply chain as well. The approach should also form a golden thread methodology. And like I said before, have your organizational vision and your drivers, what's driving you, what's important for you as an organization. It could be compliance with legislation. You might want to be seen as market leaders in driving change, have a competitive advantage over your peers in your industry. Those drivers will help shape your policy and your strategy. Policy and strategy should be endorsed by the leadership, and this does not necessarily mean just signing off by the CEO or the MD and then the document is forgotten. But VFL, so visible, felt leadership, are they walking the walk, talking the talk, and giving the message to people on the ground and on the shop floor that these are our goals and ambitions as an organization, and this is why we're embedding sustainability throughout the organization. You've got some enablers that help you to embed sustainability into procurement. Use your existing governance documents, enable your people by training and upskilling them. Engage with your stakeholders in the procurement process. And of course, the most important stakeholders are your external ones, and that is your suppliers. Set priorities for where you want to concentrate your effort. Every supplier will not bring on the same risk and opportunity to you. Every works package will not bring on the same risk and opportunity to you. Probably your top 10, top 20 spend, depending on the value, duration, and scope of your works packages as well. Measure and think about performance management, of course, as part of the process. There is no use embedding KPIs and collecting data from contracts on sustainability, and then you don't know what to do with the data. So think about, what do I need to collect data on? What am I trying to measure and analyze? And is it of any use to my organization? Does it align with my organizational ambitions and goals? Finally, embed all of this into the procurement process of plan, source, and manage. I won't talk a lot about of it over here because Nimesh will give us a beautiful example in the case study that he will present, and you will see it live in action over there. What is the outcome of all of this effort and the process? We talked about triple bottom line, the golden thread methodology, embedding sustainability considerations in a very systematic manner in your process. The outcome of that is social value, but not just social value, it's generated social value rather than you've awarded a contract, your tier 1 or tier 2 is doing something brilliant out there on site in terms of circular economy, reducing waste, which is ad hoc, not necessarily a project or a client-driven decision. By you proactively embedding your sustainability goals and considerations into the procurement process, you are generating social value at the other end. Just a bit of a definition on the screen. It's a way of describing the benefits to society from the delivery of goods, work, services, whatever it is that you're procuring. Includes your triple bottom line, social, economic, and environmental benefits, which when experienced by people and the community gives them a better quality of life and added well-being. Buyers and suppliers, so what do you need to do? Buying side, embed social value right from the beginning, right throughout your project. Don't ask for everything. Prioritize what's the size of my supplier organization, what's the value, the duration of this package, what are the geographical nuances around the location of my project. It's all not down to you and me as procurement professionals. Everyone who feeds into the process, make them accountable for it as well. Carefully consider what questions you're asking at tender stage. Keep them smart. I have seen documents around reduction for carbon where a client asked, how will you heal the ozone layer? And the supplier went, ha, 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 if all the cows on the planet just behave themselves, ... But I've seen documents that ask, if you're going to ask a stupid question, you're basically going to get a stupid answer. Make it contractual. If you've asked for commitments in the tender stage, then don't forget to include it into the final awarded subcontract. Otherwise, it's not legally binding on your supply chain to deliver on these commitments. After the contract's fully executed, supply goes and performs out on site, monitor and measure that performance, ask for data to back it up. Lessons learned for things that did not go right, and when the supplier smashes it out the park, meets your requirements, do capture good news case studies and share positive outcomes. Suppliers, when you're responding to a tender, make sure you set out clear, measurable, realistic targets of what you're able to offer in terms of added value to the buying organization or the project. Don't overpromise. Demonstrate added social value. On a workshop yesterday, an SME organization asked me, they said, Mel, I do not stand a chance because everyone else on the tender list is either large or medium. I will be cut out of the race. To which I said, are you going on the journey of sustainability, whatever it is? I think in considering circular economy, etc. And they're like, yes, we are at the start of the journey. I'm like, then mention that in your tender return, in the answers to the tender questions. So at least you can demonstrate that you are going on that journey. Focus on the quality, not the quantity. Don't be overwhelmed by the ITT questions that come out. Yes, we do tend to ask a lot of high level and robust questions, but think about reasonable endeavors. If you've been asked to bring on board 10 apprentices per £1 million of spend, I'm just exaggerating here, but you could swap it around because that may be too much for you. You can swap it around with things like, can we do a bit more community engagement events if we're not able to give you that many apprentices on board? So have those reasonable endeavor conversations collaboratively with your client organizations as well. Be specific in what it is you can deliver, and don't be vague. Right, so I get a break from talking and I'm able to hand over to my host. So we're going to look at sustainable procurement in action. We've got two guest speakers today on our session, and they will be supported by James and Imogen, who also work for Action Sustainability. We will first start with Nimesh Mehta, and he will talk about the West London Alliance's project in embedding low carbon procurement. And then we hand over to Imogen and Sophie, and they'll talk about Grosvenor's supply chain charter. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to Nimesh and James.
Cool.
Hey, thanks, Mel. I'm really excited to be here this afternoon to share our experience of what we're doing at Harrow. Just to maybe sort of link in with what some of Mel was saying initially around social value. At Harrow and at most councils, social value has for several years now been sort of embedded into our procurement processes, and on the whole, we do it quite well. The segue into what we're doing now around social value, really, that I'd just like to mention is though we've been doing it very well and we've had incredible amount of benefits come through our social value through our procurement program, it has primarily been focused on on the social side as opposed to the environmental side. So, you know, getting lots of apprentices in, getting people back into work, trying to get the SMEs into the first tier supply chain. And it hasn't really enormously or emphasized the sort of environmental side. So I just sort of like to sort of bring that in, given what Mel said about social value. Now, I got involved in sort of the climate change agenda, probably sort of spring 2020 now. Harrow Council, like most councils, declared a climate emergency and an ambition to reach sort of net zero by 2030, which if you're my age, you know, 2030 is around the corner. So there's a lot of work to be done around that. And I got involved primarily, there was lots of actions. There was a task force that was set up. And of course, one of the key elements around reduction of carbon emissions is our supply chain. We spend several £100 million a year. We have hundreds and hundreds of suppliers. We have a bid procurement program annually. And that was certainly an area we had to do something with when it comes to this agenda. So the drivers and motivation to do something, I think, is hopefully quite clear to all of us. We can all see through the news and through the weather systems we've been experiencing that, you know, we have a global crisis on our hands. And I firmly believe that though it's a global crisis, you know, it requires local actions, and it requires all of us in our professional capacities as well as our capacities as citizens, if you like, to take this agenda very seriously. So I mean, the way I look at it, you know, it's the behaviour, the poor behaviour of sort of businesses and consumers that needs to be addressed here. When we start thinking about, you know, what are the drivers. Now, you know, the reasons why are we doing this and what are we doing? So, you know, we acknowledged back in 2020 as a council that we needed to take numerous actions around the crisis. And one of them was, of course, reducing the carbon footprint of our supply chain, which is where I come in. As I've said, Harrow spends millions of pounds annually procuring works, goods and services from third-party suppliers. And we recognise that as a significant component of our overall carbon footprint, our emissions arising from our supply chains embodied in the works, goods and services that they deliver on our behalf. So I knew this would be no different from other councils, and immediately when I started thinking about what action I needed to take, it occurred to me that all my counterparts across London will need to be thinking about the same thing. And that's where the West London Alliance comes in. Now, the West London Alliance, for those of you who don't or haven't come across that before, is a group of local authorities who have come together many, many years ago. It's been going for about 2 decades now, to do things of common interest together. So it's a loose relationship. It has no sort of legal vehicle around it. And so what I immediately set out doing is talking to my counterparts across the other councils in West London, because I just felt that the power of many is far greater than just the power of Harrow Council by ourselves. So at the back end of 2020, we came together and set up this group, and we started talking about carbon reduction, about climate emergency, how it was a priority for all of our organisations, and what we need to do as heads of procurement to support that key organisation priority that we all had. We met monthly, and very quickly we decided that we really want to be ensuring that we create the awareness within our own organizations and within the key officers within our organizations about this agenda. And by that I mean procurement professionals, and commissioners, those who sort of think about what services are required, who develop the specifications for those services, right through to contract managers. And we just felt that a lot of organizational priorities do come through procurement and commissioning, whether it's social value, whether it's strengthening the local economy, whether it's what we're looking at and talking about today. So we just felt we needed to ensure that we introduce this in a sensible way, because procurement and commissioning professionals are always getting something new to incorporate into our commission and procurement programs. So we started thinking about, well, what we really want to be doing is creating some sort of low carbon procurement policy, and we want a toolkit, a simple toolkit that commissioning and procurement professionals can use, and that will support them in their day-to-day tendering and procurement work that they do. So we started working on that, and like I said, the whole idea was that we would create greater momentum around the priority with our combined buying power, to deliver positive outcomes more quickly and extensively than we would if we were just doing it in a single borough way. So we all came together, and we developed a set of documents which we'll come on to in a moment. So if I just sort of really talk about what the aims were, like I said, the aims really are to sort of drive consistency and action on carbon reduction across the local authorities that came together for this piece of work. The way I look at it in simple terms is that there were two aims really, an internal aim and an external aim. Now, the internal aim was to create a suite of documentation to support officers across all the councils, develop the skills, knowledge, confidence to apply the good practice on carbon reduction through the whole commission and procurement cycle, from design and specification writing through the sort of tender process and into the contract management. So the internal aim really was to give confidence to those people who are going to be actually implementing this agenda, to give them confidence to know what they're doing. So that was clearly a big internal aim, because without them having that confidence, without them having that knowledge, without them having that skill, we weren't really going to achieve the outcomes that we're looking to achieve here. Then there was the external aim, and that was that we wanted a powerful single message from all the councils going out to our supplier markets, that we are serious about climate change, we're serious about the climate change agenda, and we will now be requiring all our contractors who want to work with us to also be serious about it. Now, I'll come on to this probably a bit later too, but we weren't expecting, and we're not expecting even now, for all the organisations that tender for this, and sort of Mel sort of alluded to this earlier, to have cracked it. Yeah, to come to us saying they net zero, they know exactly what's going on, they know exactly what they're going to do. But what we do want all suppliers to do is to join the journey. And that's really important because we do acknowledge that this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. But in the same breath, we also are absolutely certain that this is something that we can't ignore. Then in terms of the scope, I've sort of said it covers the whole commissioning cycle, if you like, right through sort of conceptualization, through to the sort of live procurement and sort of putting together tender documents and so on, thinking about questions we're going to ask, how we're going to weight them, how we're going to evaluate them, right through to award of contract and actually managing and monitoring outcomes. So the scope will be to incorporate the requirements for suppliers to demonstrate what they are currently doing to reduce their carbon emissions, and then what they will do through the life of the lifetime of the contract they win with us, with the idea being to reduce their carbon footprint through the delivery of that contract from day one to the point that the contract comes to an end. So again, you know, we accept that it's going to be a journey, and it's going to be about incremental improvements, but it has to be a journey where improvements are made. So the toolkit will support commissioners and procurement teams to do this, right from pre-procurement, right through to award of contracts and through to contract management. Who was all this intended for? There are clearly multiple stakeholders in this agenda, internal and external. Certainly from an internal perspective, for us at Harrow and for the other councils who are with us on this journey, it really would go right from the top. You know, the political leadership, right through senior management, right down to sort of the practitioners on the shop floor, if you like, you know, the commissioning and procurement officers who actually deliver the procurement programs. And of course, externally, we've got multiple stakeholders who it's intended for. So one of the things we've created, again, we'll come onto it in a moment, is a supplier charter. And really, you know, the whole principle behind that charter is to get suppliers, both existing and new suppliers that come through our procurement processes, to understand and accept the principles behind that charter and come with us on that journey. So we'll look at that in a moment too. So again, the purpose was really to support professionals on the ground to make this happen. And that's the most important thing. You know, the key thing we set out with was we don't want to create 100-page document that looks absolutely fantastic, but actually means nothing to anybody, and no, you know, there is no incentive to pick it up. We want to create something which is simple and which is usable, so it allows things and progress to happen. So that was really important to us. Keep it simple, as they say. I mean, the other purpose, of course, at a sort of national level is it supports what's going on at central government level. There have been procurement policy notes which require all contracting authorities to consider national priorities within their procurement activities. And amongst those national priorities is, of course, tackling climate change and reducing waste. So certainly, you know, at a local level, there is absolutely the priority to do this, but actually those priorities actually are cascading, you know, down to us from a national level. So you know, there was absolutely every reason to actually do what we've done, both as professionals, but obviously, as I've said before, also as citizens. So if we go on to slide 2, now I can't see the slides, but I think what you should be able to see is slide 2, which is a draft of the work we've done there around the charter, policy, and toolkit. So these are our suite of documents that has been developed in collaboration with 7 other boroughs. And what we have here is the charter. The charter is like I said, is a supplier-facing document that establishes the principles of joint working towards low carbon outcomes. And the intention is that the charter will be sent to each borough's existing suppliers with an invitation to participate in the initiatives. Furthermore, it is envisaged that it will be a requirement of all new suppliers appointed by each of our councils to sign up to the charter. Then you've got the policy document, and this sets out all the boroughs' overall approach to using their procurement and supply chain management processes to reduce carbon emissions. And then we've got the toolkit, and like I've said, that is to a set of tools for our officers, our procurement officers, contract managers, commission officers, who are involved in the procurement process, to help them incorporate the climate change agenda into our procurement processes. So it'll help with sort of heat mapping. It will help with think about what questions we want to ask in tenders. It'll help understand that depending on the sort of category of work that you're going out to procure, whether it's social care, whether it's a regeneration and construction, whether it's IT, the impact of carbon on those sectors. So then it can be quite a complex sort of subject matter, but we've tried to keep it as simple as possible, so people have the confidence to be able to use it. Back to you, Mel.
James, over to you for the remaining content.
Yeah, just unmute. Thanks, Nimesh. I'm just going to do a very quick bit to build on the heat mapping that Nimesh was talking about there, just as kind of some of the key information at the core of this. So you can see what I'm sharing at the moment covers the whole process that Nimesh was just talking about with the charter, policy, and toolkit. And if I just push those slides on, the toolkit, and at the heart of the toolkit is something called heat mapping. And the standard that Mel was talking about, ISO 2400, talks a lot about prioritization. So prioritizing where your key hotspots are to get the biggest bang for your buck, essentially. And we've taken that approach to carbon in procurement of the goods and services that Nimesh has been talking about. So this is wedded throughout the whole of the commissioning cycle. It's not just the question, it's that process when a commissioner comes and a requisition is raised, and you take it through the whole process. And then at the core of it is something that we have called heat mapping. And this is just one example that we wanted to pull up here. It gives you that prioritization. Where is the biggest area you can make most effect through the procurement of a product or service? So if we look at IT just for a second, and it's a RAG rating, we all know RAG ratings. In IT, one of the biggest areas where the largest amount of carbon is emitted through the life cycle of that product, but also importantly, where we think we have leverage and scope to do something different to actually reduce it, it's in the use phase when we're plugging in and using our laptops, our IT equipment, and so on, our printers. There's also something around end of life to make sure it gets recycled properly at end of life. So that comes up as a red as well. And then looking further up the manufacturing supply chain where it's fabricated, there's probably some level of interaction there around the way it's manufactured, the embodied carbon. Going through this kind of process helps us identify where we want to ask our questions effectively. There isn't time really, or the leverage to ask questions across every single part of that product, because there's many other questions we want to ask as well, and other things we need to understand from our supply chain. But when we're talking about sustainability, and in this case carbon, we can focus in on those couple of things which are relevant to us. and that leads to a set of questions. So what Nimesh was talking about earlier is that process of helping us define which questions we should be putting out to the supply chain. And importantly, understanding what a good response looks like as well. So a key part of the toolkits that we've heard about is what a good response looks like to those questions. And I'll pause there. Mel, back to you.
Yeah, so we're going to take questions at the end, but I will hand over to Imogen and Sophie, perhaps. Sophie, if you're able to use your microphone.
I guess first to check, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
very
yeah, we
clear.
can. Yeah.
Apologies about that. Yes, I always seem to have problems on Zoom, so I've had to now join on my mobile, so I'm afraid I can't turn video on, and Imogen is kindly going to do the slides for me. So as I wasn't able to earlier, maybe I'll start by introducing myself. Are you okay, Mel, for us to delve straight into the trial section? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, introduce yourself and then carry on, Sophie, that's fine.
Great, thank you. So I'm Sophie Winterbottom. I'm the head of supplier management at Grosvenor Property UK. So firstly, thank you for letting me join. And I've been asked to join today to talk about our supply chain charter. So Imogen, if you wouldn't mind, could I ask you to move to the first slide? Great. So we haven't got a huge amount of time today, so it's going to be a bit of a sort of whistle-stop tour. We'll go quite quickly, but I'm going to try and cover background, the purpose of the charter, the journey that we've been on, where we're at currently, how we work with our suppliers on the charter, and then a few sort of key learnings. So in terms of purpose, why do we have the charter? I think it's actually probably quite neatly and nicely explained by actually the phrase that we have on the front of our charter document itself, which is, it's all about us partnering with businesses that share our values and commitment to delivering social, economic and environmental change. So how does the charter do that? Well, it sets out the standards and the expectations we have, both of ourselves at Grosvenor, but also the suppliers that we work with. So within the charter, we have 12 commitments. These commitments cover a range of different areas and topics, from ethics to the environment, to health and safety, to responsible payment culture. And then within each of those commitments, we have our requirements, our expectations. And those requirements are split between our standard requirements and what we call our advanced expectations. So the standard requirements are all about the minimum standards that we expect our suppliers to adhere to, or the minimum standards we expect them to aim for. And then the advanced requirements or advanced expectations are, as implied, sort of pushing the boundaries, pushing further, and also recognizing that change is happening all the time. Things are moving quickly, and we wanted to ensure that the charter would keep up with that and evolve over time. So we have these sort of advanced expectations. So those commitments, combined with the requirements, provide an ethical and responsible framework on how we do business. And the charter demonstrates that not only do we operate to the highest standards, but we expect this of our supply chain too. Before moving on to the next slide, it's probably worth just mentioning our charter is a publicly available document. It's on our website, so feel free to go and take a look and check it out. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, please, Imogen. Thank you. So with regards to the sort of the journey we've been on and where we're at currently, the charter was established in 2019. We worked with Action Sustainability, and it was a result of a comprehensive review of our working practices in the UK and also looking at our supplier relationships. So having released the supply chain charter, how is it that we work with our suppliers on it? How do we work with them in terms of our expectations when it comes to the charter? So as it says here, we take a proportionate approach. What that means is that whilst we expect all of our suppliers to support the charter in principle, and indeed we expect them to sign up to the charter as part of their contract with Grosvenor, It is only our key suppliers that we expect to go further. And by further, I mean we expect to actually report their performance against the Charter. So just a little bit on reporting. So as I said, we've got our commitments under the Charter and we have our requirements. And then what we did was come up with metrics that we ask our suppliers to regularly report against, that we use to then assess performance against the Charter. So the reason for this is, yes, we want to understand how our suppliers are doing and make sure that they are improving and aligning with our Charter, but actually it's more about gaining that insight, gaining that understanding about different suppliers, about different groups of suppliers, and using that insight to work together, to collaborate with the aim of driving improvements and seeing real change. So it's about understanding, are there any key themes that are coming out of this reporting that our suppliers are giving us? Are there any common issues across our groups of suppliers, or indeed are there suppliers that are doing great and we can share those learnings with others and help others overall to improve? So it's really about sort of that first step in starting the conversation in order for us to drive the change and drive the improvements that we want to see throughout our supply chain. So probably leads on quite nicely to that the last point on this slide, which is that our ultimate goal is that our whole supply chain has embedded the ethos of the supply chain Charter's commitments. And that's really about the fact that we as Grosvenor can do these things and are doing these things, and that has an impact, but actually we have the potential to have a really big, really significant impact if we can also get our suppliers and their suppliers really embedding the Charter and living and breathing its commitments and its principles. That potential impact that can come from that cascading down through the supply chain is it could be big, and it's actually very exciting. It's something that personally excites me about this. In terms of where we're at in our journey, I'd say we've worked with a lot of our key suppliers over the last couple of years since its release, and we're now getting some really good reporting from suppliers, getting some really good data. And I'd say we're at that phase now where that stage now where we can sort of launch into that next phase, where we can really start to do that piece that I've talked about in terms of using that data, analysing it, understanding it, what are we getting out of it, and therefore what do we need to do, and how are we going to work and collaborate with our suppliers to see these improvements come through. So quite an exciting phase we're going into. Great to sort of see, hopefully start to see some real sort of actionable output come out of all the work over the last couple of years. If you wouldn't mind moving on to the next slide, please, Imogen. In terms of how we work with our suppliers, well, as I mentioned, we take this proportionate approach, and in order to assist with that, we established a framework for both new and existing suppliers that really sets out exactly what our expectations are of our suppliers in relation to the Charter. As I previously mentioned, it is all about taking a collaborative approach. It is really about partnering with our suppliers. We understand that working together, it has the far bigger potential to have an impact than doing these things alone. And so it really isn't about going to our suppliers, right, here's the Charter, read it, go and adhere to it. It's about working with them, having good conversations, and working together to hopefully see improvements. So what are the resources we have to help with that? Well, I mentioned reporting, so our key suppliers we expect to report regularly. And to do this, they use the sustainability tool. That is a tool that Action Sustainability provides, and is something actually Imogen is going to take you through in a bit more detail in a bit. We also have the carbon calculator, which is provided by the Sustainability School. So a great tool that we ask our suppliers to go in and enter their data so that the carbon calculator can work out their carbon emissions. It then apportions it to their clients, and Grosvenor's share of those carbon emissions will be reported to us via the sustainability tool. So a fantastic resource for us and our suppliers. And then finally, we have the Sustainability School. Now, this has a wealth of resources available on it, and again, it's very helpful to us and our suppliers, and I see as particularly helpful going forwards as we enter this phase of really starting to understand where there might be some areas that we need to see improvement, either with individual suppliers or with sort of groups of suppliers. And it comes back to that collaborative approach. Rather than just saying you're weak in this area, sort it out, we can actually use the resources on the Sustainability School, point them to things that are there that will actually help them in those areas. And then the final point on this slide is just about the fact that the charter that we have, as I mentioned earlier, covers a wide range of areas, and it is specific for our suppliers. However, it's also a very useful tool to help us deliver some of our overall business-wide targets and ambitions. So we have, Grosvenor has our net zero 2030 target, and the charter via the environmental commitments we have within that, is a very useful tool for us to work with our suppliers to help us deliver on those overall targets. Next slide, please, Imogen. Thank you. So just to finish off, I just wanted to share a few key learnings that we've had on our journey. The first one is about the fact that the charter sets out principles and our expectations. It is at a relatively high level. It is not detailed metrics, and actually that is incredibly helpful because, as we know, things are changing all the time. We can't be going back and revising, editing and releasing a charter all the time, and therefore having that flexibility via having about these higher level principles and expectations means that it stands the test of time. So we're 2 years in now, and when I read the charter, it is all still relevant. All the points still resonate. It's still valid today. And then we can use the reporting tool to gain that sort of more specific information around what we want in terms of metrics, and then helping us understand the performance against the charter. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean that we don't look at the charter in terms of making sure it's still relevant and updated, and it is something that we will be reviewing, and likely there'll be a further iteration of this at some point. But being able to get on with the actual delivering of the charter and not consistently rewriting it is very helpful. Second point is a really important one. So I started my role just over a year ago, and wasn't really sure how our suppliers felt about our charter, how they felt about what we expected of them being new in role. And actually, I've been very, not surprised, but very pleased to find that actually the interactions I have with our suppliers, they are very positive. They are very supportive. They understand that it is important for businesses to be aware of their environmental and social impacts and doing something about it. And actually not just that they should be, that they actually really want to. So the desire is out there. And what we find is some of our suppliers are at relatively early stages of this journey, and they find our charter and having something to look at and work from really helpful for them. They're not having to start from scratch. And similarly with the reporting tool, yes, there is input required for them, but actually, again, it's something that is helpful for them, not just for Grosvenor, for other clients. And we've found that people really do understand the benefit of it and want to work with us on this. That being said, it's really important that we don't lose our suppliers. We don't bog them down with admin and let it become a frustration, so they sort of lose the will. And I think a couple of things on that. One is about demonstrating, explaining the benefits. As I mentioned, the support's there, they can see it. Actually, that's quite an easy sell. They've got it, they know why, and they want to do it. So then it is about making sure it doesn't become that admin burden for them, and it continues to be useful for them. And what we've found with that is really having a very simple, straightforward approach has been very helpful. So we have quite a quick onboarding process when it comes to reporting. Literally sort of an upfront conversation with them. explaining what we'd like from them. And then we get them onto a training session with Imogen, and I'm sure she'll touch on that in a minute. And then we get them straight on the tool reporting. And yes, it might take a couple of reporting cycles for them to get fully comfortable with exactly what's required, but actually we find that quick, streamlined process keeps the engagement and gets people really getting to what we want them to be doing, which is putting their information into the tool and then starting to analyse the output from it. Last couple of things, say especially early on in your journey, it's really important to focus on the key insights, the things we really want to look at, things that will really help drive improvements. I've mentioned we have a lot of commitments in our charter. There are a lot of requirements underneath them. We could have a whole suite of metrics that we ask suppliers to report against, but we don't want to overwhelm them. And also we need to make sure that actually what we're going to get from them is something we use, is something that's insightful, that's going to help us on that journey to improvement. So really just focusing on what are the key areas you want to look at. And then there's always the potential to build on that as suppliers mature, as we all learn from each other and continue on this journey. You can bring in different metrics into the reporting tool. We can adapt things as needed. And that links to the very last point, which is about being flexible. I think it's, this is a journey. I think we are all learning on this, and things change all the time. So being adaptable, being flexible is really key. And just to give a really simple example of that, when we started having suppliers report against our charter, we asked them to do it monthly. What we actually found with that was that it was too much, in the sense that it was taking suppliers time to compile the information. Then there wasn't enough time to review it. We weren't then sort of having time to analyze it and look at the output from it before you're going to the next reporting cycle. So actually, we speak to our suppliers regularly. They provided this feedback, and we adjusted it. So now we do it quarterly. And what we've found since then is that the quality of the information is just far improved. We've got the time to digest it, really use it, and then start to work towards, as I said, those conversations about what we do with that going forward, which really is sort of the real crux of what we want to be doing. So yeah, be flexible. And on that, I probably didn't go on too long. So on that, I'll hand over to Imogen, if that's all right. And she's just going to show you the reporting tool that we use.
Thanks, Sophie. Hi, everyone. Let me just share my screen and show you the sustainability tool, which is what Sophie's been exactly talking about. So here on the screen now, you should still be able to see the sustainability tool. Great, thanks, Mel. So what we've got here is the dashboard. So what I've got is complete dummy data. So this is all pretend data just for the purposes of showing you how Grosvenor use the sustainability tool. The reason for this is a key message that I get across whenever I engage with suppliers is that the information that they submit themselves, only they can see, and Grosvenor, they can't see any other supplier's information. So for the purposes of this, I'm showing you dummy data. What we've got at the top are the sustainability issues, things like waste, employees, ethics. Now these align with the 12 commitments from Grosvenor's supply chain charter. So if you remember back to when Sophie was saying about went through a process of understanding what metrics you wanted to include within the tool. So we made this bespoke to Grosvenor. So if I come down and show you how the sustainability tool works itself. So just to recap on what we spoke about, it's a sustainability performance software. So essentially, suppliers are asked to report into the tool. They'll join a training session. So I support Sophie and Grosvenor, and I deliver fortnightly training sessions. They're drop-in sessions. So any supplier that is new to the process will join that training session, and it's an hour. And also suppliers that may have already been reporting, but actually they've just got a bit confused, or they just want a refresher, they join those sessions as well. So I think having that fortnightly touch point is helpful for suppliers to know there's always a point of contact there should they have any questions. In those sessions, I take them through right from the very beginning of what fundamentally is the sustainability tool, why have they been asked to report, how do they report, and then the key question that they're all asking of what is it that you want me to report. So they know the standards and the aspirations, as Sophie mentioned, they're displayed within the supply chain charter, But as that's quite broad, we can then enable the metrics to be specific. So what I'll do is I'll just show you how the tool works and how Sophie and Grosvenor use this to understand and performance management. And then I'll show you the report itself. So on this sustainability tool, for example, I'm going to show you procurement and waste for the purposes of today. I'm not going to go too detailed. I can come down and a specific metric, a specific indicator that Grosvenor have set is the percentage of payments made within 30 days during this period. Now this aligns with the section within the supply chain charter around prompt payment, wanting to know the number of suppliers that are paying their suppliers within 30 days. The tool itself can show you the cumulative information. So I can look in September, I can look in December as well. And a reminder again, this is dummy data that I've put in here. But I can see against a target that I've set of 100, that the information is at 100%. Therefore, the red, amber and green tiles that we've got here, so this is showing up as green. Our performance is at 100%. I can even dive down into the detail and look specifically at which suppliers have reported that information. I can see where there's red, where there's green. So as Sophie mentioned earlier, if there's green, where can we share best practice amongst other suppliers? If there's red, where do they need support? Can we link them up with specific resources from the supply chain school, for example, or the carbon calculator? Link all of those things together to support the suppliers. If I come on to waste, for example, so I can see the performance management itself. So I can see these tiles and see exactly, well, percentage of construction waste diverted from landfill is showing up as a red here for my dummy supplier. So I can look at the information, see how they're performing, see that they're very close to the threshold here of 90%, but they're not, they're just at 87%. So how can we support them as Grosvenor? How can we support them to improve? Whether it's understanding, are they submitting the right data? Do they need support with understanding the process? Or actually, do they need support on site to improve waste levels that are being diverted from landfill? And I can compare different ones. I can contrast if I'm comparing construction with demolition and excavation waste. I can then see how they're comparing quarterly. So as Sophie mentioned, we moved from monthly to quarterly based on feedback. So what I think is really nice from my experience and the way that Grosvenor work with their suppliers is that feedback is constantly there. I ask suppliers for feedback within the fortnightly training sessions that I run, because I say Grosvenor do listen. They want to know what your feedback is so we can improve this process, which is really nice. So what I'll do now is I will just move to this tab here, which is the report itself. So this is what suppliers are asked to see and report on a quarterly basis. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the different tabs, but you'll notice that at the top, we've got carbon, procurement, health and safety, ethics, etc. And these align with those sustainability issues that we saw on the dashboard, which are the 12 commitments from Grosvenor's supply chain charter. So for procurement, for example, just following through that procurement and waste trend that we're following through there, I've got metrics such as the total number of suppliers and subcontractors this year, the number of payments made within 30 days, total number of payments, and the percentage spend with SMEs. And you'll see that not all of these metrics are asked for quarterly. They vary. We've got one that's asked for once a year, a few that are every few months, and then the percentage of spend with SMEs is quarterly. So it really varies there, and is also based upon the feedback that we get from suppliers as to how frequently do they collect this information. If I come over to waste as well, you can see here the breakdown of waste metrics that we ask for. So we've got total waste at the top there, which is made up of sub-metrics below that when you input the information, they auto-calculate above. So for example, if I change this one there, you'll see that that auto-calculates. And suppliers that are required to submit information on construction waste, demolition waste, excavation waste, etc., will find the metric that is relevant to them. For example, is it reused? Does it go to energy recovery, or has it been sent to landfill or recycled in that quarter? And then they would input the relevant information. Once they've gone through the report, they submit the report, and this is a key kind of fundamental part of the sustainability tool, is that every report that is submitted has to have an approver that comes in to sense check the information, see if there's anything missing, and then either reject or approve the report. So the way that this works for Grosvenor is that there is a relationship manager assigned to each supplier who act as the approver. So what's really nice here is that the relationship managers, so people within Grosvenor, are actually having sight and understanding what information the suppliers are submitting. This kind of has multiple benefits to it in that the supplier feels that the data that they're inputting, the time that they're inputting into this process is being valued, the data is being looked at. And then from a relationship manager's perspective, they understand what the supplier is doing, how they're performing, how they can support them, and then can have regular review meetings with them and can combine the data aspect of this with wider issues. So if a relationship manager is having a general meeting with a supplier on a variety of different topics, can include this within that. So it's a nice mechanism there to structure a conversation. I think that was all the key points I wanted to get across there. So I will stop sharing my screen and pass back to you, Mel.
Thank you, Imogen. Thank you, Imogen and Sophie. We're going to have Q&A because we've got about 14 or 15 minutes left. But having said that, what I will do first is post in the chat box the feedback form link, so that if you do not have a question for any of us today on the panel, you can go in and fill out.
You just got on mute, Mel.
And I'm on mute. And I've just said a whole long sentence. So what I was trying to say is, before going on to the Q&A session, I will post in the chat box the link to our feedback form, multi-choice questions. For those of you who do not have any questions for us on the panel, please go in and fill in that feedback form. I've just put it in the chat box. So I'm going to dive right into the questions. So this one is for Nimesh first and James. Is the WLA heat map for greenhouse gas emissions based on assumptions, or was it actual suppliers, EPDs, LCAs, so environmental product declarations, life cycle assessments, and how did you work the hotspots out?
I can pick that one up if you want, Nimesh.
Please.
Essentially, it's from having done lots and lots and lots of these with many, many clients in the past. So it's a wealth of experience and knowledge. And it's a discussion as well with various stakeholders within the councils about what they perceive to be the key priorities as well. So it's not just one person sat in a darkened room thinking, is it red, amber, green? It's a group process to address these. And importantly, it's not just where is the biggest amount of carbon coming from, and this is where the other stakeholders play an important role. It's where do we, as the client, so in this case, Harrow or the West London Alliance, have the leverage to do something about it. So there might be a huge amount of carbon, but can we do something about it? Yes or no? And the third point was the scope piece as well. Is there something different we could do instead? Because if we have no leverage and there's no scope to do anything else, what's the point of asking a question? So that would either be an amber or even a green in the RAG rating. Hopefully that helps.
That helps. There's one here for Sophie, because your chart has already been published. So the question is, since embarking on your charter, have you ever removed a supplier for not adhering to it?
Oh, good question. Relatively new in roles, I have to say, not as far as I'm aware. And I think it says that when we're signing up new suppliers, absolutely it is critical that they understand the charter, that they sign up to it. And if we had someone say, I don't agree with it, it's not, these are things that aren't important to me, then they aren't a supplier that we want to work with. But in terms of sort of existing suppliers, this is a journey, and I think I alluded it to what I was saying, that we have our minimum standards, but it might be that that some of our suppliers need to do some work to get there. So we haven't removed anyone yet. We're at that stage of really trying to work with our suppliers to make sure that they do meet our requirements.
Yeah, and I'll just add to what Sophie said, that it's about taking your supply chain on your journey. Some of them, especially the large players in the market, will be quite mature in that journey. It's about upskilling and training and taking the SMEs on that journey as well. We're not cutting them out completely out of the tender list. So hopefully that answers that question. Again, one for Sophie and Imogen, probably one for Imogen. Are there any metrics or measures around responsibly sourced materials?
Yes, as in the sustainability tool in general, you can make it kind of as bespoke as you want in terms of responsible sourcing. Metrics can exist on that. For Grosvenor, we focus on the kind of higher priority items. And so for the time being, what we ask of suppliers covers procurement, but specifically on materials, not just yet as such. But as Sophie said, the charter itself, the process is always flowing and changing depending on what's current, what's important, and suppliers' feedback. So that's definitely not to say that that may be included in the future.
Thanks, Imogen. So I've got two questions around charters here. This may be one probably for Nimesh, but also for Sophie. Do suppliers ever complain about having to deal with too many different charters from too many different organizations instead of having one uniform charter to use? Nimesh, over to you first.
Yeah. Frankly, I'd expect them to. I'd expect them to complain, and that was one of the reasons we came together, because too often in the public sector, we have very similar public organisations doing very similar things in very different ways. And it is frustrating for the supply markets. So my response to that would be, I would expect them to, and we don't always get it right, but certainly this time round, we have decided to come together for that very reason, that we can actually go to the market with one voice and one message and one set of documentation.
Okay, that's brilliant. So that also answers the other query, which is on the Q&A chat, which talks about this presenting challenges and getting commonalities to work on together. So like the piece the West London Alliance and Nimesh have done is 8 boroughs and West London Waste have come together to present a common charter so that the suppliers do not have to respond to all different types of ITT and SQ questions, different policies, different charters. So they're actually tied up on that journey as well. So hopefully that answers both of those questions. But there are a couple of others. So Sophie, what has been your experience in your supply chain's acceptance of the charter and the willingness to implement it? Mind you, I've been on a couple of those meetings last year, but if you want to tell us about your experience.
Yeah, I think I in sort of that key learnings piece, I spoke about it, and as I said, my experience overall has been incredibly positive. I think it's fair to say that this is these sorts of items that we cover in our charter have moved up everyone's agenda very quickly, and so actually it's a good time. I mean, people are talking about this, they're thinking about this. So in terms of willingness to accept it, yes, absolutely. I haven't come across anyone who has said who looks at it says I don't agree with this. Sorry, was there a second part, Mel, to that question?
No, that was it, because you're also quite new on that journey, isn't it? When did you launch your charter, Sophie? Was it last year?
The charter was 2019. I said, I think it is sort of slightly alludes to the previous question as well. I think the main challenges have been around actually just sort of the admin piece and people having to manage it, and what does it mean practically for people. It's not a lack of sort of an unwillingness to align to it or to do something about it. It's just actually the practical impact of it and what it means for them. But as I said, that's actually, even with that, my experience over the last year or so, I just think that everyone is really keen. Everyone really wants to be doing these things, and it's a great time to be trying to work with our suppliers on it.
That's brilliant. I'm just going to quickly point the participants and the attendees again towards the feedback form in the chat, because we've literally got one more question, and hopefully I can give you a couple of minutes back of your life today. So please fill in the feedback form. Nimesh, this one is for you. So you're starting on the journey of communicating your toolkit, your policy and charter. We'll be starting training from next week for procurement professionals and then for SMEs, so externally. So we've anticipated the training need, but are there any other barriers, potential barriers or hesitations when this piece of work is finally fully rolled out? What's keeping you awake at night in this?
I tend to be a half glass full person. Look, with the introduction of anything, with any policy, with the sort of the implementation phase, that's always the most difficult, and it really needs to be thought through carefully, because it's no use doing what has been about a year's piece of work for people not to follow through and champion it with you. So the communication plan, if you like, and the implementation plan are key and need to be thought through really carefully. We've got 8 boroughs who have come together, which is about 25% of London boroughs. So in that, we have got sort of powerful traction in itself. We've got to, I suppose, through our training, ensure that the message is simple, that it's delivered in a way that people want to join the journey and are excited by the journey. I mean, I personally am a case in point, but back in spring 2020, I knew very little about this, and since then, I've just learned more and more and more. But that's because, the people I've been around, have been good enough to be able to explain things to me in a way that I understand, and I understand how it fits into my role. And that's what I need to make sure I do with the commissioners in my organisation, with the procurement professionals in my organisation, with the contract managers in my organisation, with the political leadership in my organisation, with the senior management in my organisation. And of course, externally, I've got to make sure I carry those sort of same messages in a simple format to our supply chains. And as Sophie's alluded to earlier, your supply chain is a spectrum from your big national companies right through to smaller organizations, and they will have very different learning curves. And you've got to make sure you are able to impart information. You have got to ensure that you're proportionate in the way you implement this within the market. So in terms of what keeps me awake at night, I know what keeps me awake at night, and my job is to ensure that with everything I work through with my team, with your team, James and Mel, that we look to mitigate against the possibility of putting people to sleep around this agenda, because that's that is the danger here.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that. There was a question for Imogen. So it was around the sustainability tool, and is it applicable, available to other industry sectors outside of construction? So yes, it is. It can be set up as a bespoke tool to your organization, your sector, structured around whatever your needs are, whatever your goals and ambitions and targets are, to include the metrics as relevant to your organization. I'm just conscious for time. We've got about 6 minutes left. But I'd like to allude to what you said, Nimesh, and you said it's a year's worth of work that we've done together. At the start of the presentation, I talked about embedding sustainability considerations into procurement. It's a journey, it's not a race. If it's a race, then be a tortoise, not a hare, and if possible, just be a sloth. Take 3 steps forward in your journey. If it does not feel right, come back again 2 steps and just start again, but do it properly. Take time to do it right, but don't be in a hurry, otherwise you're going to end up making mistakes. Thank you to the panelists for joining us today. Thank you, Billy, for pulling it all together at the last minute in spite of the glitches. Thank you for your patience, attendees and audience.